All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming out on a very freezing cold day today. Talk about some computer science stuff. I hope you all came ready to, get your hands dirty. Well, figuratively, I guess. It depends on how clean your keyboard is, I suppose. But we're going to be working on exercises in front of the laptop. Hope you got Windows. If you're on a Windows machine, I hope you got that installed successfully. But please let me know maybe after class if you had problems with that. I'd be happy to help you out, try and work through whatever issues you're facing. But as I kind of mentioned at the end of class on Tuesday, these are meant to be very hands-on, very interactive classes. I'm not going to be showing you slides. I will be talking, a bit, but I'm also going to be showing you stuff, and I'm hoping that you'll follow along with me as I do that stuff. And I'm also going to give you some exercises to do. So kind of like we did on Tuesday, I'll give you 5 or 10 minutes to work on little exercises here in class, and then we'll go through them together. That's kind of the flow of the course. So today we're going to get our introduction to command line. I also want to repeat something else that I said on Tuesday, just to make sure we're all on the same page. This class is for intended, the primary audience for this class is intended for novices, people who just came out of CSE 1301. So I understand that that's not all of you. I understand some of you maybe already know how to use the command line a little bit, or maybe even a lot of it, and that's not a bad thing at all. I think that's great. But I am this lecture and the whole class is geared around no prior knowledge. So I'm starting from absolutely the absolute basics, and we're going to work our way up from there. I think you'll probably still learn a thing or two, even if you do have some prior knowledge. At least I hope you will. But you may also need to have a bit of patience as we go through some of the stuff you already know. If you already do have a lot of experience, and if you don't have any command line experience, please let me know if I'm going too fast because I do realize, and other people could probably vouch for me on this, that command line can be a little intimidating at first, be a little scary, can run into some problems that are different than the kinds of problems you run into when you're writing code, for example. Be a little bit tricky to figure them out sometimes. And that's okay. That's part of the learning process. It's part of the experience. The best way to get better at it is to practice. So that's kind of how this course is set up, is to get you as much opportunity to practice as possible, so that hopefully you get more and more comfortable. And I hope you extend that outside of class too, right? Like even if you're not required to use the command line for stuff, maybe try and use the command line to use stuff, because the more you build those skills, the more you practice those skills, the more comfortable you're getting. So let's first start talking about what the command line is. The command line is a utility. In fact, first off, I should probably start with the very, very, very basics. How do we get it up on our machines? If you have a Mac, you're going to use the little search feature. It's going to be called Terminal. So if you search for Terminal on your Mac, that's what we're looking for. If you're on a Windows machine and you followed the instructions that I gave you, the best way that I know how to pull up the command line on a Windows machine, if you're using Windows Subsystem for Linux, is to start by using the Windows command prompt. So I get to that by searching for CMD or searching for the command prompt on my Windows machine. But actually, if you open this up, this looks like a command line. It actually is a command line, but it is not the one that we want. So we actually want the one that I had you install, and this is not it. In order to get to the one that I had you install, you need to type in the word bash and hit return, and that should hopefully pull you up to.
Oh, my apologies. You don't lower the screen in 218.
There's buttons on the by the side of the instructor station that should do it, or it might be a light that have the switches. It
lower the screen in 287. Oh,
lower it down.
yeah.
See buttons on the wall. If you select one of the source format. I'm sorry. Yeah, I need to call IT in.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, yeah. So if you're on a Windows machine, if you see the green text and the blue text, that's an indication that you're in the right place. If you have the C colon is right, I can see up here where I originally started. That's Windows. useful for, well, I don't know actually if that's true. This is the command line that we're going to be using in this class. And when people talk about the command line, this is almost always what they are referring to. Now, I actually do think it's important to note that if you're on a Mac, you're using a slightly different command line than this one. The one that I had you install and the one that I'll be talking about throughout the semester is called Bash. Bash is kind of the default command line. We'll talk about the command line. They're usually talking about Bash. Bash has been around since about the late 80s. And anytime you work on a web server, for example, that's probably the command line interface that you're going to get. Macs and Apple have decided that Bash wasn't good enough for them. And I don't remember how long ago, a few years back, they started using something called Z Shell, which is just another version of the command line. And so if you're using a terminal on a Mac machine, that's actually probably what you're looking at. Bash is so widely used that Z Shell can do everything that Bash does. So everything that I'm teaching you about Bash will also work on your Mac Z Shell. It's just Z Shell can do other stuff too that I'm not really going to talk about. But if you're interested in learning more about, you're welcome to investigate and discover those things on your own. Actually, if you want to do some extra digging, Bash is still on your Macs. It's there somewhere. You can go find it and use the actual Bash if that's what you want. But it's not really necessary. Z Shell on your Mac is going to be just fine. And I think even if you are using Z Shell, you might be thinking, well, why would I ever use Bash? Consider that a lot of times our work requires us to work with other computers, especially if we're talking about things on the internet. Probably going to be connecting to servers. Those servers probably not going to be running Apple software, right? Probably going to be running Linux or some other version. And so Bash is what you're going to get. So knowing the basic Bash commands is important, I think, for any programmer, regardless of whether you're a Windows user or Mac user or whatever kind of user you happen to be. These are the standard basic commands that are going to work on just about any command line that you ever come across in your career. Of course, there are others that have more niche use cases, but this is the standard. And it's been that way for at least a few decades now, since the 90s or so, it's been like this. So what is this? This is actually a lot different than, for someone coming right out of 1301, the intro class, it looks a lot different than VS Code, right? It looks, kind of intimidating. There's no buttons to click. Your mouse is not going to be very useful dealing with the camera. In fact, the keyboard is pretty much the only way we can interact with it. And we do that by typing in commands. Might be wondering, well, that sounds very clunky, very unintuitive. However, there are good reasons to learn how to use this. There are some tools that are only going to work via command line. They don't have a fancy user interface with buttons to click. It just doesn't exist. It takes time to make those, right? It takes time to make a user interface with windows and buttons. And, we have whole classes on how to do that properly called human-computer interaction. And I think it's, useful, but it also takes a lot of time, energy, money to make those things. And it's just not strictly necessary for every single tool, every single command that we want to use to have buttons to click on and windows to look at, things like that. Another good reason to learn how to use the command line, which I find to be especially true, it's just faster in a lot of cases to be able to type commands. In fact, I would argue the mouse, anytime you use the mouse, you're slowing yourself down. So one thing that I try to challenge myself to do quite often is to see how long I can keep my hands on the keyboard without using the mouse at all. And the command line makes that much, 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 much easier to do. If you want to train yourself to do that, I think you'll find that you become a lot more efficient, a lot more effective, the less you use the mouse. Even if you're doing things like web browsing, right? If you learn all the hotkeys and how to open tabs and switch tabs, you can do it so much faster by not taking your hands off the keyboard. So, I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm just saying that is a common thing that people will try to do when they're learning the command line and trying to get more efficient on it. So, let's see, where am I at here? Yeah. So the main reason that we use the command line is actually not to code so much as to interact with the operating system and the files that are on our. So that is most of what we're going to be doing today, is typing commands that interact with the files, and sometimes we'll be opening programs, so running programs to interact with our files. Not directly related to coding, but a lot of utilities that are just nice to know how to do if you're doing a lot of coding. As you know, coding requires lots of files, and file management's a big part of that. So knowing how to interact with your computer on this level is a pretty crucial skill. And we're going to start with the very basics, as I mentioned. The first command I want to show you is the echo command, which is basically Bash's version of a print command, right? So the classic entry point into any computer-related thing is to have a hello world program, and here it is. This is a hello world program for Bash. This is the simplest way that you can have Bash do something for us, and you can see that once I type in that command, notice hello world quotes, for string, it happily prints that out onto the command line. You might be wondering, well, that doesn't seem very useful, right? And I would agree. Printing out little messages, not a huge amount of utility on its own. But once we start learning about more commands and combining them together to perform more and more complicated tasks, this actually turns out to be something pretty useful that we are going to want to use from time to time. Let's talk about some other common commands. The next command that I would like to show you is called pwd. This one a little bit harder to determine what the heck it's doing just based off of its name. If we hit return, it shows us a piece of information. What is this piece of information? It's a path, or just a path. Super. What is it? What is it a path to? It's a path to where I am right now. So I think that is one thing that is always very, very important to keep in mind when you're using the command line is where are you? I am always using commands within a directory, folder, directory folder, take a file, right? Same kind of idea, same kind of thing. The commands that I run are going to work differently depending on which folder I am in, because there will be different files depending on which folder I am in. And when I say folder, these are quite literally the same folders and the same files that you would see if you opened up Finder on a Mac, or if you opened up the File Explorer on your Windows machine. It's the same ones. It's just instead of using a mouse to click on the folder, we're using the command line to access those files, folders, and navigate around the files and folders that exist on our machine. So PWD stands for Print Working Directory. This is basically, where am I? What directory am I in right now? And yours probably isn't the same as mine, because you can see my username is right there. But I would expect if you just opened up the terminal and ran pwd, you'd probably see your username in there, although not necessarily, depending on how your terminal is set up. But the files and folders that are on your computer are different than mine, so this is going to look a little bit different than yours. Paths are so important. I'm going to be talking about paths a lot and file structure a lot today. So I want to take a moment just to point out that this is what's known as an absolute path. Absolute paths start from what's called the root of your file system. So if you think of the folders that are on your computer, right? Some folders are inside of other folders, which are inside of other folders, which are inside of other folders. But where does it all begin? Where does the file system, quote unquote, begin? We call that the root. On a Windows machine, the root typically is your C drive, right? On a Mac, it's called what? HD or hard disk, or I don't actually remember exactly what it's called on a Mac. But when I'm looking at a file path, I can tell whether it is an absolute file path or not by checking the very first character. If I see a slash, That is an absolute file path. And that is telling me from the very beginning of my file system how to get to where I am now. So go into the folder called maps, go into the folder called C, go into the folder called users, go into the folder called DS Shook, and that's where you are. So it's giving me step-by-step directions on how to get there. An equivalent way of thinking about that from humans is if you wanted to give someone directions, but regardless of where you start, regardless of where you're going, you always start in the same place. So on campus, that would be like the clock tower, right? So if somebody says, "Hey, how do I get to Walgreens?" Say, "Well, starting from the clock tower, you go out this road, then you turn onto this road." How do I get to McDonald's? Well, starting from the clock tower, you go out this way, go out that way, right? So absolute paths always start from the same place. You give directions. You give directions on what neighbors to take. And the way that we distinguish that is by they start from. That'll come up again and again and again, and I'll try and point that out as we move along and take a look at some other stuff. But for now, let's move on to some more commands. The next command I want to take a look at is called uname. So if I type in uname and I hit return, it tells me Linux. Okay. I'm actually on a Windows machine, so that might be a little surprising, but I am using Windows subsystem for Linux, so it kind of looks, so in that sense, somewhat accurate. If you're on a Mac, I wouldn't expect the same thing. I'd be very surprised if that Linux, you're on the machine, probably says OSX or something along those lines. I'm not exactly sure what that command might spit out. But okay, so it's telling me information about the computer that I'm on, about the system that I'm running, but actually it can do more than that. Let's try and modify this command a little bit using something called a flag. If we type -A after the that, anytime you see that used as part of a command, flags are used to tell the commands to run a little bit differently or with a different set of options, right? Allows you to customize how the commands run, sort of similar to passing a parameter to a vector, right? Similar kind of idea. What does the -A flag do? Well, let's run it and find out. Oh, wow, that is a whole heck of a lot more information than we got the last. So putting -A on this or what all this stuff is, to be honest. I see a date here. It's probably the date that this was created. It's telling me that it's a 64-bit machine. That's not terribly surprising. It's not what it's telling me about. It's okay. Right. That's not really the point I'm trying to make here. The point I'm trying to make is that we can customize how commands run by using different flags. So, okay, what flags can we use? Can I use any letter as a flag? Well, no, B doesn't work. So it doesn't recognize B as a flag. And we could sit here all day and guess which flags might work and which flags might not work. X doesn't work, U doesn't work. Wow, I'm doing a bad job of guessing. J. All right. This is kind of silly. I hope you realize that this is maybe not the best way of going about it. I haven't even found a single one. P? Oh, P works. Okay. What does the P flag do though? I don't know. I just got lucky. Finally guessed the letter that worked. Correct. That's not how we're going to use flags. To know what the flag represents. Because each flag actually stands for something, right? It's doing something in particular. It's not just random. But how do we figure that out? So this is where I'm going to introduce you to a very, very, very important command that lets us take a look at the manual for any command that exists on our command line. And to access the manual, it's actually the man command. After the word man, type the name of the command that you're interested in learning about. So if I want to learn about the uname command, type man uname. And if I hit return, here we can see the manual for the uname command. So it tells me what it does, print system information, that's exactly right. And then below here, it gives us a little bit of description on how we can use it, as well as all the flags. And you can see the dash flag that I used for all, print all of the information that you can. That seems reasonable based on what we saw, right? But there are other flags listed here as well. So the P flag tells me about the processor type. Oh, that makes sense. It said x8660, so it seems about right. Right? And if there's other things that you're interested in, I don't know what all of these things are referring to, right? Not all of these are relevant to me, but if you're looking for something in particular, then you go down this list until you find what you need, and it, then you can run that flag. If you go down far enough, well, so this isn't maybe the best example, but a lot of times they'll even show you common um, examples of how, if you want to do this way. This one doesn't really contain a whole lot of that information, but you will commonly see that in, a lot of the other commands that you come across. Now, notice I'm not using the mouse to navigate this, right? I'm using the up and down arrow keys. And then to get out of here, you actually have to use the Q key to get back. So again, all keyboard, all the time. Mouse isn't really going to help. Got to get used to using the keyboard to navigate around and take a look at these commands and run these commands. We can do the same with PWD, right? Man PWD says prints the name of the current working directory. Oh, and it has some flags too, which is interesting. I didn't use any. In fact, I usually don't with the PWD. Just run it by itself. Should I need them, I can look them up. I can use them, in whatever way that I need to. Let's see. I'm about to turn you loose on your very first exercise. It's not a very hard one. It's the first one, so kind of not super challenging. But before I do that, does anybody have any questions about what I've covered up until this point? All right, it's your turn. Some of you I'm going to ask you to do this exercise, and some of you may already know the answers to the questions I'm about to ask you, and that's fine. I would still encourage you to do some digging on your own and look up and see if you can learn some more information. But let me pull up the first exercise for you, and I'll give you probably about 5 minutes will be sufficient for this first one, and then we'll move on to the next topic. All right. Using the information that I've provided so far, do some digging. See if you can tell me what these two commands do. Do some research. I would imagine some of you probably already have an idea, but some of you may not. Do some research. See if you can tell me what these commands do. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. I'll be around, and then we'll have a chat. Well, it's all hard, right? That's clever. Where there's in all limited burdens. I totally to sort of this is the point in time where I recommend some go through. So you need to figure it out. Good that point. So surprise doesn't I tests. So It's crazy. I walked over here by oh, you got to plug in. Okay, this wasn't a super duper tough exercise, but hopefully you were able to make some progress on it, or maybe you already had some ideas. But I hope when faced with this task that you did one of two things. I think either one would have been good. Obviously I've been talking about the manual, so typing in man ls would have been, I think, a good idea. And it tells you right up at the top when it's going to list this command. The one that I use almost more than any other commands on the command line. This is one that is burned into my brain so much that I don't even really think about it a lot of times. I just automatically type it in a whole bunch because it's so useful to look and see what files you have access to, right? So it's going to tell you all of the files that are in the folder that you are currently in. And another way that you can verify that is by, you know, the second option would be to just try it, right? Like it's not going to hurt anything. Although there are some commands that might hurt things, but this isn't one of them. This is a a pretty safe command to run. So just try it and see what happens. You can see that, oh wow, there's a lot of different files that get displayed. Well, wait a second. I recognize these, right? These are the files that are on my computer. In fact, if I pull up, you know, my file browser and go into my home folder on my Windows machine, you'll see that, okay, I can see all of these files as the ones that exist in my home directory, which is where I am right now. It's got the CSE1301 folder. It's got a CurseForge folder because my kids like to play a lot of. Well, actually, where is the CurseForge folder? Oh, there it is. Because my kids like to play a lot of Minecraft. So it's showing me what files exist, and it's the same information again that you could get by using the File Explorer if you wanted to. But the nice thing about doing it on the command line is that, okay, what if I want to run commands to operate on this? It's not for the finder for the files. So ls is such a useful command. We're going to actually talk about ls a little bit more in just a moment, but let's talk about that second command. This is one that I would expect to be new to a lot more people, not one that is as commonly used, but one that is still very useful. Instead of looking at the manual, I'm going to start by just trying it and seeing what happens. Okay, that's interesting information. I see some stuff that I recognize, like dash. It says PS. Wait, huh, interesting. Get that off. What is this command actually doing? Let's take a look at the manual and clear it up once and for all. We can see that, oh, a snapshot of the commands that are currently running. All the commands that are currently running. Which makes sense. The only ones that I had running when I ran it were bash, that's the terminal that I'm using, might say Z shell if you're on a Mac, or some other system, and PS itself shows up on the list of commands that are currently running because when this but that's how it works. If you have other commands running, which at some point we eventually will, they would show up on this list as well. This is actually a very useful command, especially if you ever have problems with, a command that has gone rogue, right? Maybe I ran this command thinking it would do something, and instead it went off and is doing this entire other thing, and I'm a little worried about that. So you can actually use this number over here, the process ID number, to terminate commands if you want to. I'm not going to show you that one right now, but that is a very common use case for using the PS command, and it actually should give it. You can see there's a very, very detailed explanation of this command, as well as lots of different flags, lots of different common flags combinations. So, I would encourage you to try some of these out as well and see the differences that it gives to you. There's so many different ways to take a look at lots of different flags available, more than I have time to go into at this particular moment. But this is another very useful command, especially as you become more experienced and start using lots more commands on. So yeah, let's talk more about ls though. Ls is such a useful command, and actually the next series of commands that I want to talk to you about all relate to files and folders. We're going to start talking about how to navigate around as well. How do I go from one folder to another folder on the command line? Because again, the commands that we run and how they work oftentimes depend on where we are, what folder we're in, what files we currently have access to. So knowing what files are available to me and knowing how to move around to different parts of my computer so that I can access different files is a crucial part of learning how to understand the command line. So ls on its own just gives me a list. And actually, you can see on my computer, it's color-coded. That's useful. The ones that are the blue text on a green background, those are directories. Those are folders, contrasted with the other files that are in blue text or in green text without the background. Those are just files, right? Those are just regular files, not folders, but just files. Could be any kind of file, right? So it's kind of giving me some information, but there's a whole heck of a lot more information that ls can provide to us. In fact, the first flag that's on here is a useful one. -A stands for all. So let's try that one out. If I type ls-a, okay, so far the list looks pretty similar, but if I scroll up here at the top, there's a bunch of stuff here at the top that I didn't see when I ran ls by itself. Any of these, availability of these, you may not have any. You may have different ones. You may have more than them. Kind of depends on what files exist in your computer. But what important about files on anything that starts with a dot is what's called a hidden file. Those files are hidden for a reason. Usually it's to prevent, average people from messing around with them. It contains a critical piece of data, a critical piece of information. As programmers, as we start learning more, we are kind of the people who are allowed to mess around with some of this stuff if we know what we're doing. It's definitely a case where I'm not just going to run in there and start blasting, right? I want to know what I'm doing first before I start messing around with those hidden files a lot. But it is definitely also something that I do mess around with. I need. So Good to know that there are hidden files that exist, but you can also see them. You can also access them using the ls command. Some other, let's see, what's the other flag? I don't know if I can remember it. I might have to look it up. I think it's ls-l. Oh yeah, this is a good one. So this gives me a whole lot of information about the file. So yes, I see the names of the files and directories over here, but I also see more information about it, such as this column here. The manual will tell you what this column is, but I know what it is as well. This is the size. So how big is this file in bytes? In bytes. So, 4096 would be 4 kilobytes, right? On your machine. Whereas that's a big boy right there. I don't even know how many that is. It's a lot. But most of these are fairly small. Most of these do not take up a whole lot of space. So that's a good thing to know how to do if you want to look up the size. This is the date is usually an indication of when it was last modified, when somebody last did something. So when did they last change the file? When did they last change that directory? Whether that is, changing the properties or changing the contents itself, that'll both affect the last modified date. So you can see that there's a lot more useful information here. You can see my name shows up a lot over here because I own these files. So it's showing me, okay, which of the users. But if you're on a computer that's used by a lot of different, you might see a whole lot of different groups there, and that's good to know. Because the files that you can access sometimes depend on who owns them. We're actually going to talk about that a bit more later on today, as a matter of fact. But before we do that, let's start to talk about navigation. So I am currently in my home directory, as I would imagine most of you are if you've been following along with me today, but a lot of times the files that I want are somewhere else. So how do I tell the command line to go somewhere else? If I want to go into, I guess, I'll pick, I don't know which directory I might pick this one because I actually know mostly what's in there. Pick a directory though. Again, a directory is going to be one of these that is highlighted in green, or if you are unsure, you can also just look in your Finder. Pick a folder, right, that you have that is available to you, and we're going to use a command to tell the command line to go into that directory. So the command is a classic cd. Any of you who have used the command line before, I'm sure I've already come across this command, but this is a very, very important one. It can also be a little bit tricky to use because we never use it by itself. CD stands for change directory. So after the name of the command, we have to tell it where we want to go. Which directory do we want to go into? So if I want to go into my CSE2307 directory, I'm going to type the full name of that directory, and capitalization does matter, so I made sure to do it in caps, right? Since that's how it's made. And now you'll see that after I run that command, I probably don't have this folder in here, so pick another folder, CD in you'll see that, oh, it's updated. And it now tells me that I'm in the CSE1301 directory, or we can use that command that I told you about earlier. What was that command that tells us where we are? PWD. We can use that command if we want to, and it'll also tell us, hey, you are no longer in the folder called CSE1301 directory. So we have moved. We're in a different directory now. Not only that, I can hit ls, and it'll tell me what files exist in this directory. So you can see that I've got some repositories in here that I use when I teach the intro. You may recognize them. Took the intro class with me. And so that's the contents of this directory. And so now if I wanted to, go even further, I could cd into one of these directories. cd base exam prep 3. And actually, I think I just did something sort of intuitively, but I want to tell you about it because it's so important. Sometimes things are long. Sometimes it takes a long time to type out everything. And if I mess up one letter, it's not going to work. If I forget a letter or I type in caps when it's supposed to be lowercase, the CD command is not going to work. So one very useful tool, it's been so burned into my brain that I did it automatically just then, is to type in the first few letters of the place I want to go and then hit the tab key. The tab key is an autocomplete. It will try and complete as much as you want. You'll notice that it did add a few letters, but it didn't. There's different. So we got the base, index, and then like there's a few different ways to go from here, but I don't know which way you want to go. So okay. If that's the case, you actually have a few different ways you can go about it. If you hit tab again, it'll show you the different options, right? And then if I type a few more letters, exam, there we go. That was enough for it to decide, oh, hey, you must be wanting to go into, actually, it's still ambiguous. It's enough with this one. It doesn't know. So it's kind of waiting for me to decide whether this is the one that I'm, or this, type a little bit more in. It's something that takes some getting used to, but I would encourage you to practice using it as much as possible because it's such a time saver. Such a great way of avoiding mistakes to use the tab key to autocomplete for us. And now if I, finish running this command, it'll take me into this directory. And if I want to see what's in this directory, I can type ls, which is almost an automatic for me. Anytime after I run cd, almost always running ls right afterwards to see what files are in the directory. Now, earlier we talked about paths. I showed you an example of an absolute path. Absolute paths always start with slash, and they always start from the same place, which is the root. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the roots later on today. But these are also paths. So this is a path. And the other one that I did up here, CSE2307, is still a path. But these are not absolute paths. And I know this because there's no slash. These are what we call relative paths. Relative. So a relative path is like giving someone directions based on where you are right now, relative to my current position. So notice I didn't have to say the whole thing, right? I didn't have to say CD / mount / C / I didn't have to type all of that out. I can just say CD CSE1301, and because that directory is where I currently was, right next to me, it knew what I was talking about. And right? Same thing for this one. So knowing the difference between relative paths and absolute paths is absolutely crucial. And you'll use both of them in different circles. When using CD, most of the time, I'm using relative. There are times when I also want to use absolute paths with CD. So if I really want to type CD and then all of this stuff, right? Mount C user. If I really want to do this, it'll work. Oops, except I typed something wrong. I see. I made a typo in the very first one. My fault. So it'll work, right? I can use an absolute path here, but that's not typing. If the directory or the place I'm trying to get to is near where I currently am, probably better to use a relative. Yeah. And there are some relative paths that are very important to know and understand. For example, if I go back into my CSE1301, let's say that I do something in this direction, and I want to go back to my home directory. How do I get there? Well, one way I just showed, right? I can type CD followed by absolute path. That'll always work. Start at the clock tower and then yada yada yada. Get to the place where you're going. But it's a lot of extra typing. And what if I don't know all of the different directions there, right? if I'm not exactly sure. That could take a long time. It could be a little bit confusing. So there's a very special relative path that is good to know, which is dot dot. Dot dot is a special relative path that says backwards. If I am in this directory, dot dot is going to take me to this, the one that I was in first step. Or another way of thinking about it, it's going to take me to the directory that this one is contained within. So it's going to take me up one level compared to where I'm at. So if I run this, you'll see that the CSE2307 goes away. I'm now back into my. This is very, very useful for navigating around. In fact, a lot of times I'll chain it together because I can have folders within folders within folders. What if I want to go up 3 times, right? What if I want to go back 3 steps? I could type cd dot dot 3 times. But we can also chain things together using slashes. So for example, I can say cd CSE1301 slash, and now it's waiting for me to type in another folder. So take a folder that's in this. And I know that we just did this a little bit ago. There's one called base. What was it called again? Well, I can use tab. Base. Oh yeah, base exam. Oh, there we go. So using tab to autocomplete can help. And now, oops, I typed that one in wrong. Go back and fix it. So instead of going just one folder away, I jumped 2 folders, right? By putting a slash. The same thing works in reverse. If I want to back up 2 levels, I could type cd dot dot, return cd dot dot, return again, or I could type cd dot dot slash dot dot. And that'll take me back 2 levels. That'll take me back 2 directories, which in this case would put me right back where we started, which is the home directory. Finding. I know that some of this might be a little bit confusing, especially for those of you who are new, but this is the bread and butter of using the command line. These are the skills that you absolutely need to practice if you're going to get effective at using the command line. Fortunately, I've already showed you some tricks to help out. Let me show you a couple of other tricks that are useful to know. You might have already seen me do this one where I make a typo. I'm like, whoops, I need to fix that typo. I could type the whole thing out all over again. That's kind of a pain in the butt to have to type out the whole command, especially if it's very long. So instead of that, it's much easier to use the up and down arrow keys to cycle backwards. So if I push the up key, it just works its way backwards through the commands. And if I push down, it works its way forwards through the commands that I typed. So, you can see this one where I made a typo. It's much easier for me to just cycle back through and find it and then go back and change the typo than it is to type out the entire command again. So using those up and down arrows to scroll backwards and forwards through the commands you've typed out is another one of those essential kind of command line life hacks that you absolutely should take the time to learn how to do. Another good one, sort of related to the one that I showed you just now with the up and down arrows. There's a history command. So if I type in the word history and I hit return, oh look, there's all the commands that I typed. Should be literally that I've typed since I started going all the way back to the beginning of class. If I want to run one of these, what was that command? There's a command that I ran half an hour ago. I wish I could run that, but I forgot what it was. Well, instead of having to figure it out, look at your history, go back and find that. You want to run this one again. It's got a number next to it, 55. In order to run that command again, I can say exclamation point 55. The exclamation point is a shortcut to our history. It says go back and run the command that's labeled 55. And once it does that, it says this is the command that is listed as 55. It's another very, very, very useful little trick. If you're working on the command line a lot, because there are lots of different commands and lots of different options, and you're not going to be able to remember them all. So it's good to be able to look them up and take them back out when you need to do so. All right. I'm going to get back to my home directory here because I want to show you how to start manipulating things. So we're getting into a little bit of a dangerous territory now. As of this point, I haven't changed anything, right? I showed you some files. I moved around a little bit. I haven't created anything. I haven't destroyed anything. We certainly can, though. So I want to show you how to do that because it is important, but I also want to make sure that you're aware that some of these commands that I'm about to show you, there's no undo, right? There's no way to back up from it. So it's important to be careful with some of these and make sure that you know exactly what's going to happen before you run it, because if you make a mistake, you can't back it up. So the next command I want to show you is the dir command, which stands for make directory. So this allows us to make a new folder. It's actually the same exact thing. If on my Windows machine, I came here and I right click and I say new folder, literally doing the same thing. Exactly the same thing, just via the command line. So, I already have a folder in here for my intro class, but I don't have a folder in here for this class. So let me make one, CSE2307. I'm saying make a folder called CSE2307. I hit enter. If I hit LS, I should hopefully see, if I scroll up, there it is. Not only that, though, if I go back here, you see it's not showing up yet. But if I hit the refresh button, poof, there it is, right? I am manipulating the same exact files, same exact folders that I would get through clicking around the way they were used to. So it's just another way of doing that, right? Another way of accessing those files in those folders. Okay. Let's talk about some other commands. What if I want to delete something? So the rm command stands for remove. And this is the one that is particularly dangerous. If you remove a folder using this command, it is gone. It doesn't go to the recycle bin. Go fish it out later. It is gone forever. Cannot get it back. So be very, very careful when doing this. I'm not sure that there's even anything on here that I want to delete. I might actually make a fake file here real quick in order to show how to use this one. Delete me.txt is the file that I just created. I spelled it wrong, but that doesn't matter. Spelling is not my strong suit. All right. So I created a file solely for the purpose of being deleted. There it is. Misspelled and all. So if I want to, I can say rm, and I'll use tab to autocomplete so I don't have to worry about my spelling mistake, right? If I run this, ls shows me that it's gone. It's not on this list anymore. But also, if I come back here, it's gone, right? It's gone. And it's gone for good. Like I said, it's not another it's not waiting to be recovered. It is just gone. White. Cannot get it back. So be careful. Definitely necessary to do that sometimes, but you do want to be careful because it is permanent. It doesn't work for directories. So if I want to say remove CSE2307, that directory that I just created, it'll tell me, hey, that's a directory. Well, that's nice. It's trying to protect me a little bit. It's important to do that. So there's a flag. If you want to use the rm command on a directory, there's a flag for that. You would say rm-r. The R stands for recursive in this case. It's a recursive delete. Be aware, though, that if you use this to delete a directory, it's going to delete all of the files that are in that directory. It's going to delete every whole folder. Poof, gone. So that's one way to do it, but in true computer fashion, there's another way to do it as well. You can also say rmdir for remove directory, right? That's another command that will get us to the same place. If I type CSE2307 after the remove command, it didn't give me any warnings or anything this time. It's poof, gone. In fact, we can go back here and see that, yep, there it is. It's gone. It's all gone. Couple more I want to show you, and then we'll do another exercise. The next command that I would like to show you is called mv, short for move. So if I want to move a directory from place to another, I can use the mv command to make that happen. Let's say I want to take one of these directories that I have and just move it to this directory. How would I do that? I can say move CSE1301 / base exam whatever. There we go. I want to take this directory and I want to move it to the directory that I am currently in. There is another relative path that is very, very good to know. It's a special one, like the dot dot. So dot dot is used to refer to one level up. The one that's useful to us now is a single dot. If you ever see a single dot all by itself in the context of the command line, that means here, where I'm currently standing. So the way to interpret this command is take this directory and put it in the directory that I am currently in, which is the one with my name, right? And so if I run this command and then do an ls after it's done, you can see that there it is. It's been moved, and I can actually verify that by, again, refreshing in my file browser. There it is right there. And also I can go in here and see that, oh, it's gone. There used to be 3 directories here. Now there's only 2 because I moved one of them. I moved it. And along those same lines, a similar but different command is the cp command, short for copy. So if you want to make a copy of something, this can be either files or directories, right? So maybe I want to take a copy of that folder and put it back where it used to be. Put it in the CSE1301. Oops. Helps if I type it properly. So take that folder that I just moved, make a copy of it, and put it back into the directory where it was. I actually suspect that this command maybe won't work. Let's see. Yeah. So just like we saw with the rm command, if this was not a directory, a folder, this would have worked. But because this is not just a plain file within a folder, we have to specify that -r flag again. So I'll use the up arrow to go back and then say -r. And this time it made a copy of that directory and put it back, which I can once again show you by, hey, there it is. It's back. And if I wanted to kind of close the loop by deleting this copy that I made, I could say something like rm-r base exam. There's 2 copies, so I don't mind deleting one of them. Oh, see, it's trying to protect me again. Are you sure you want to delete this file? It's asking me yes or no. And one of the annoying things is that it's going to ask me for, potentially lots of different. Fortunately for me, there were only 3 things that it asked me if I was sure about. If there were a lot of files, you could imagine that it would be sitting here asking you all day. That could take a while. So another thing that you might want to consider doing is rm-rf, where the F stands for force. Don't ask me yes or no, just do it. Again, a very common command, very powerful command. It's just going to blow away whatever the target is. And you're not. So be careful. I use this one. I don't use it, but also full of doing damage. as possible. Police don't intend to lead. So just be careful. Just be careful. All righty. I know I threw a lot of information at you. It's a lot of stuff. Any questions that I can address before we do another episode? Chat. Go back to any of the stuff yet. If not, this exercise I think is going to take you a little bit longer than the last one. I'll give you at least 5 minutes, although we'll see how things go. Let me pull it up for you here. It is right here. So I'm assuming that you're going to start in your home folder, right? I'm asking you to make some directories, then make some more directories, copy some files. This bin bash. What kind of different pad? Absolute and relevant. This. Absolutes. Absolute. There's a chance that may not exist. It doesn't even file. But I picked one that I was hoping would exist on 99 machines. But yeah, go take a few moments. You're welcome to talk to your friends too, or of course flag me down if you need any help, and we'll go through this one in 5 to 10 minutes. Quite a- You're in this season. Okay. It's okay. Happens to all of us. Yeah. So if you're in, okay, we are running a little short on time. I know some of you aren't quite finished with this yet, but I think we have enough time to go through this before we have to wrap things up today. So I want to walk through this one step by step. A lot of great questions, by the way. Love to see you all working on this and thinking hard about these problems. The first thing that they exercise asked us to do was to make a directory called test. And I think most people were able to figure this one out pretty simply by just running the make directory and typing the word test after it. I think it's important though also too, just to, verify with your own knowledge that, oh, hey, there it is. I can see it when I run ls, right? Yes, it very much did make the directory. It then asks you to make more directories within that folder, in that directory. I'm going to show you actually a couple different ways to do this because I suspect many of you, in fact, I know some of you did it this way, where you use the cd command to go into the test directory. And then once you're inside of the test directory, you ran mkdir first. And if you look at ls, that works. And I think that's totally. But I also want to point out that if I wanted to, I wouldn't have had to use CD at all. I could have done it from where I was. I could have done it from my initial starting point. So for the second folder, I'm actually going to CD dot dot to go back to my home directory. And this time I will make directory, I'll say test slash second. So this is saying, okay, go into the test directory and then you can do the equivalent thing as going to then directory command. Two different ways of doing it, depending on what your needs are and how comfortable you're feeling with what you're trying to do. But I do want to show you that yeah, it does in fact work. If I go into the test directory and run ls now, I can see that it worked. I have two directories, one called first. The next part of the exercise had you copy a file And one thing that I really want to chat with you about, and I'm not sure that I'll have time to do it today. I might have to wait till next week to get there. But one thing I really want to chat to you about is the uh, file structure of a typical system, right? How the file system is typically structured. The file that I told you to grab was called slash bin slash bash. So if I cd into this is, in other words, if I type cd dot dot, eventually I'm going to get to the highest point that I can, and that's this. Eventually I'm going to get to the root. The root is the beginning of the file. It's the essence of the file system. I can get anywhere I want from the root, but the place that I told you to go specifically was a place called bin. And bin is short for binary. But what actually is inside of that bin folder? Well, let's take a look. If I cd into bin, and then I type ls, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I don't recognize, but then there's also some other stuff that I do recognize. Bash, if I scroll up far enough, will be one of them. Here it is. There's bash. Now, wait a second. Think about that first. What does that mean? I'm seeing bash when I run ls. There's other things that I also would expect us to recognize because we talked about them today. There's ps. If I scroll down here far enough, I will find, where is it? ls, right? cd is in here somewhere, right? Other things, you name. There's man, right? We talked about that command today as well. There's make directory. Now, wait a second. What does all this mean? Commands that we've been running. Everything. Everything on a computer is file in some shape. Everything that we interact with on a computer is in a file of some shape or form. So when I said, copy slash bin slash bash into the folder, I was telling you to copy the bash program, the entire program. You made a copy of it, right? You don't really need 2 copies of it. You really only need 1. But it's just a way for me to show you that, hey, everything on your computer is a file. Everything on your computer can be manipulated through the command line using these commands that we're learning. It's a very, very, very powerful tool. So let me get back to my directory here and perform the next step. Here we are. Again, there's 2 different ways you could do this. I think some people, actually, there's probably 3 different ways you could do this, or maybe even more, right? Some people, I think, probably went into test and then went into first. And then, okay, now that I'm here, I want to copy slash bin slash bash. But this isn't enough. I have multiple people command similarly to this. Where do I want to put this file? Oh, well, I'm in the directory where I want to put it. How do I say that again? What's the way that I refer to the directory I'm in? That would just be dot, right? I am in the directory. So now if I type ls, there it is. There's the bash command. I made a copy of it. That's not the only way, though. So some of you maybe were in the test directory, right? And you wanted to copy it from here, and that's also fine. That's also totally okay. It would be similar, but slightly different. Copy slash bin slash bash and put it into first. That's okay. That'll work too. This is showing us the magic of talk about anything relative to where I currently allows me to phrase things in different ways. Not necessarily having to navigate to specific folders or a powerful way. And you can hopefully after this explanation that copy slapping test flash first. That also would have worked. So would have been a way to copy that file, right? In fact, maybe I can do that for, the second directory where you had to choose a file of your own. I will choose, it doesn't really matter. one of these log files, I guess. I'm not even sure what those are log files for, but I'm going to copy NT user, and I'll use tab to help me complete this because it's a weird file name. Copy that into test/second, right? I don't need to CD into test. I don't need to CD into second. I can just do it from where I am using relative paths. It's a very convenient. Oh, permission denied. Well, interesting. Interesting that that happened. That's probably the very first thing we're going to talk about on Tuesday next week is what these kinds of messages mean and why I got this message. Unfortunately, I only have 4 minutes left, so I don't have time to do that now. But I think the last part of the exercise, well, I wanted you to look at the file system and make sure that it actually looked the way that you would expect, which is there's my test folder, and there's first and second, right? So I'm actually manipulating those things, and there's the bash file, right? My copy into second failed, so it's still empty, but we can pretend that it worked for now and do the last step of the exercise, which is to delete everything. So if you tried to run rmdir on your test directory, it probably said something like this. It's not empty. This command's only going to work if it's completely empty. That tells you one of two things. Either I have to go in there and delete all the stuff that it contains, or we can use a flag. I showed you how to use flags with the remove command, so rm-r would have gotten us there with the test directory. I think that one worked just fine. And now my test directory is gone. It's like that stuff never happened, right? So if I threw a lot at you today, I encourage you very much to practice, right? There's no harm in CDing around your computer. So if this is new to you, especially, go home tonight, go home this weekend, CD around your computer, poke around a little bit, see what you find. Go from the rm command, maybe, unless you're very, very careful about it. Poke around a little bit, see what you can find, see if what you see on your computer in the command line makes sense with your own mental picture of what you expect to find on your computer. That is a very, very important skill, one that we're going to need to do all of the other stuff that we're going to need to splat. So thank you so much for your participation today. I hope you have a good weekend. Nice holiday weekend. I'll see you back here on Tuesday. One sec. I'll be right there.